Hey everybody, it's Brooke with The Buttered Home, and today we have a very special how-to to share with you. Today is not really as a recipe as it is a method by which you can do many things with. Today we're going to be teaching you how to make a white roux. Now, contrary to what a lot of people believe, a white roux is not a sauce, it's a base. So I'm going to go ahead and be getting my pan hot because that will kind of expedite things. So there's many different levels of a roux, and a roux is a lot of times a base for a bechamel sauce or a cream sauce or even a broth sauce. It's used in soups and stews. You can use it in macaroni and cheese, scalloped potatoes. There's really no limit to what you can do. Just about every soup I make begins with a roux. And a roux is just equal parts of fat and flour. And we're going to show you just the basic fundamentals on how to do the first level of a roux, and that is a white roux. That's a good basic thing, and it takes less than 5 to 10 minutes. So let's get started. I have a pan that is getting good and hot. And like I said, this is going to be equal parts of fat and flour. Now you can use all butter in this application, but I'm actually going to be using this white roux in a soup. So I'm going to be adding a little bit to my fat and make it a little versatile. This also will show you a good way to kind of mix your fats up. So we're going to start with 2 tablespoons of bacon grease, and that's going to be 1/2 of your fat. And then to that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter. Unsalted is best. That way you can control the salt that goes in your roux base. Now, I am also going to take this one step further and go ahead and make a cream sauce with this, or a white sauce. Now, this roux base is fat and flour. So after you get the roux good and cooked, and see, I got bacon bits and stuff in here, but it's okay because I'm using this in a soup that has meat in it. So always think about your fat profiles with what you're going to do with your roux. If you're making, you know, like red beans and rice or jambalaya or a soup that has meats in it, then bacon grease is a good option. I always recommend that you use 1/2 of your fat to be butter. It just gives a smooth, silky consistency, and it doesn't add any color if you don't want any color. Now, to our fat, we're going to add our flour. So we're going to do equal parts of fat and flour, remember? So we have 4 tablespoons of fat. Now I am putting in 4 tablespoons of plain flour. And I like to season the flour at this point with just a little salt and a little pepper. A roux is a lot like anytime you're building a dish, excuse me, you want to season as you go. Now guess what, folks? You just mixed up a roux. You've got equal parts of fat and flour. And now we just cook this at low to medium heat to cook the flour. Now, the white roux is this first stage that only takes about 5 minutes, anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. And you'll know it because after I added that flour, I could smell flour. After the flour is good and cooked through, then you'll start to smell the bacon grease or the butter or olive oil, whatever you are cooking, or whatever fats you use. So we're just going to let this simmer a bit. And sometimes if I'm making like a really soup that I want to thicken, I'll do just a tad bit more flour and almost make a paste. So I'm going to do that now just so you can see that. So what will happen is it will almost pull away from the bottom of the pan. You see how it pulls away from the bottom of the pan? This is your roux. So once we get that flour cooked down, there are a few more levels of this you can do. Now today we're only going to do the white roux, and I would keep a whisk on hand and keep it moving every so often so that it won't burn. It's got flour in it, so it will tend to burn. The white roux is used in sawmill gravy, things of that nature, and we stop the cooking process with whatever we're going to do with it next. We add cream, we add broth, we add milk, we add potato water, whatever you're doing at that point, that will stop that cooking process. Then if you wanted to go a step further, you could have a blonde roux, and that happens somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. And it's just a little golden color. And then you can cook it a bit longer and get like a brown roux, and that happens somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. And you'll notice the longer you cook it, the more that butter will break down and the thinner your roux will get. Then of course there is a dark roux, and that's what's used in a lot of Cajun cooking, and sometimes that can take up to 30 to 40 minutes, and it gives it a dark coffee brown color. And as long as you keep it on moderate heat and cook it for that length of time, you won't burn it. But it almost tastes like chocolate. It tends to sweeten up. There's just something that happens to that fat the longer that you cook it. Okay, I am starting to smell bacon grease. So I'm gonna bump my heat up just a little bit because I want this. I'm about to add my milk or my cream to make my cream sauce. We're gonna be using this roux in a vegetable casserole today. So I want to make just a basic cream sauce. Now the cream sauce, you can do anywhere from 2 to 4 cups of milk, and I'm just gonna drizzle that right in and stir. And you'll see the fat start to separate, but don't worry, it'll come back together. The milk fats start to break down and combine with the flour, and that's what constitutes the thickening process. This is also how we make sawmill gravy. I add sausage to this and a lot more pepper. All right, I'm putting about 2 cups of milk in here because I need 2 cups of this gravy or cream sauce. So now we let that come back up to temperature, and we're gonna let it boil, and we're gonna whisk it the whole time until it thickens. That's the beautiful thing about a roux, is it's used to thicken sauces. And what's different from it and a slurry is that by cooking the flour mixture with the fat, you have a chance to add flavor to your sauce. So this is why I think this southern roux is far superior to using a slurry or just adding flour to a broth mixture to thicken a soup or a sauce. And you can take it even one step further and add cheese to this, and then it becomes a, I guess as the French say, a bechamel or a cheese sauce. And you can just build layer upon layer upon layer and have something really velvety, flavorful, and beautiful. So I'm gonna let this get thick just so you can see how fast that happens. And I can feel some resistance on my whisk already, so I know that that is starting to happen. And then I'm gonna just stop whisking it for a minute so you can watch the bubbles come up around the side, and then you'll know that we are cooking with gas. But you can leave it thin, or you can cook it a bit longer and allow it to thicken. But this beautiful velvety white roux sauce has come together in a flash. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways you can test to see if it's ready. Well, not a couple of different ways, just one way. All right, so I'm getting pretty thick. Now, one thing I do want to mention is if you make this sauce, whether you add broth or you add a cream or a milk like we've done, it's going to happen, if you bump that heat up to medium, it's going to happen pretty fast. So I think I'm almost there. So I'm going to do the wooden spoon trick. And I know if you've been with me for very long, you've seen me do this. I just dip a wooden spoon, turn it over, run my finger through and turn the spoon both ways and make sure that my sauce doesn't drip into the trench that I just made. Another good reason to do this is that this gives you a chance to taste it and make sure that the seasoning is how you want it. So now it is exactly where I want it to be. So I turned my heat off and I'm about to remove it from the heat just as soon as we get done. That's all you have to do. A white roux is that base, equal parts of fat and flour, and you can use it in any application to make any kind of sauce or soup base or stew base, or even just keep it on hand to pour in soups and stews or even grits to thin them out or thicken. You can add more liquid to this and use it as a thinning agent whenever you're reheating something. And then as you reheat that item, it will thin it enough so that you can stir it like grits. I'll just use grits for an example. It'll thin it enough that you can stir it, but as you continue to cook it, to reheat it, it will also kind of help keep it together. So it's almost a perfect sauce, and it's widely used here in the South, and it is a skill that I believe that everybody should possess, because you can take this and you can build upon it and make a dozen different things right off the top of my head. So we hope that you've learned something today. We hope that you will make a white roux base or a brown roux, blonde roux, brown roux, or a dark roux for whatever you're cooking next. Just remember, the longer you cook it, the darker it becomes, and the darker that it will stay. So we hope that you'll take this and use it and love it as much as we do.